Please, walk very softly, passerby. My dear mother-in-law lies here, and if she hears your footsteps, I'm afraid she'll come back home.
Beneath the tombstone with a playful poem rests a resident of the Romanian village of Sapanca. It's here, in the north of the European country, that you'll find perhaps the most cheerful cemetery in the world. It's called the Mary Cemetery.
The graves are decorated with vibrant pictures featuring bright colors like yellow, red, blue, and green. It's unusual for traditional burial culture, right? Plus, each cross is inscribed with sarcastic poems, adding another layer of intrigue.
A lot of the epitaphs are more like epigrams. They talk about how this dead guy liked to chase after other men's wives, and that one liked to hit the bottle. All the headstones are in the same style because one guy made most of them, carpenter Stan Johann Petresh. Back in the mid-30s, the woodcarver had to make a monument for his wife, his dead friend. The artist approached the task creatively. Instead of a standard mournful headstone, he made a colorful cross with a funny inscription.
My teacher, Stan Johann Petresh, died in 1977. He made about 800 headstones, including one for himself, with the inscription, "This man never did anyone any harm." Nobody in the village was offended by his poems. On the contrary, everyone loved his work. We're carrying on the master's work.
The Recoleta Cemetery in Argentina has a totally different vibe. It's probably the most luxurious city of the dead in the world. It's in the west of Buenos Aires.
It's less a cemetery and more a city within a city. Everything looks pretty monumental. Each crypt is like a whole house or apartment. It's all expensive materials and it looks really beautiful.
Inside the lavish crypts, adorned with statues, bas-reliefs, and marble finishes, lie 24 Argentinian presidents, along with famous politicians, writers, and artists. But most of the captivating stories that tour guides tell tourists aren't about the celebrities at all. One of Recoleta's most famous crypts belongs to Liliana Crociati. She tragically died at 26 during her honeymoon in the Alps. An avalanche buried the cottage where she and her husband were sleeping. Her husband survived, but Liliana suffocated under the stairs.
The headstone's remarkable. It has a long poem centered on why. Her father dedicated it to her, a touching tribute. Liliana's also depicted. Even more touching, after her dog passed, they had an artist create an image of the dog right next to her headstone.
Looking down on Recoleta, you can see apartment buildings right next to the cemetery. Living next to a graveyard and seeing tombs from your window every day doesn't bother anyone here. In fact, apartments in this area are premium. The people who live here are wealthy, but even for many of them, securing a spot in Recoleta is an unaffordable luxury. They don't build new tombs in the city of the dead anymore. There's no space. And the cemetery is a UNESCO site. Some crypts are rented out for crazy money.
That's right, not everyone can actually afford that option. It's really only accessible to the wealthy, unfortunately. For the middle class or those who are less wealthy, they're initially buried here in the cemetery. Then, after about 3 years have passed, the relatives come back. The cemetery workers then take the coffin out of the crypt, mourn the deceased once again, transfer the remains to either another coffin or sometimes just a bag, and then the final burial takes place in another cemetery.
But even the most fancy crypts in Recoleta look quite modest when compared to some of the gypsy barren tombs. Those huge monuments really stand out so much in any cemetery, don't they?
These are truly big, huge monuments, some several meters high, with life-size figures depicted with all their belongings, complete with watches, bracelets, and even cars. There are indeed different kinds of Roma, and the rich ones, well, yeah, they really like to show it all off, don't they?
In 2016, the residents of Merthyr Tydfil in Wales witnessed a sight they'll probably never forget. A snow-white carriage pulled by 4 horses moved through the streets, followed by 24 limousines. You'd think it was a wedding. But no, it was the funeral of the gypsy queen, Ruby Pearl Marshall. The grandmother of 52 grandchildren passed away at 78. Her many relatives ordered bouquets totaling $23,000 and 60 wreaths.
They have nice cars, even limousines, cavalry, carriages, whatever they can imagine, really. Even Roma wakes last for 3 days, and it's quite a sight to behold.
Well, gypsies have this belief that after someone passes away, they journey to another world, continuing their life much like before. Because of this, they believe the person will need money and their personal belongings to take with them to the grave. Now, all this wealth isn't just thrown in haphazardly. Instead, they carefully dig a kind of underground mansion for the deceased, meticulously recreating the Baron's home, from the wallpaper and carpets to the furniture and even the dishes.
You can see TVs being hung inside the grave, flowers and vases arranged. Everything is set up as it was during the Baron's life. A coffin stands in the middle of the grave.
As history tells us, there have always been those who seek profit by robbing ancient tombs. They haven't disappeared in the 21st century. They've just shifted their focus to Roma graves. So some families use radical ways to protect their ancestors' graves.
To avoid looting, everything is covered in concrete and heavy concrete slabs are laid on top so that no one can get in.
According to experts, Russians spend on average between 50 and 100,000 rubles on a relative's funeral. High-end memorial services with a large number of guests cost not tens, but hundreds of thousands. In Britain, a similar hefty sum is spent by the deceased family for the most modest of funerals. In recent years, funeral services in the kingdom have almost tripled in price. Now, the bare minimum costs over £4,000, that's 500,000 rubles. And the average funeral costs Brits twice as much.
It's true, many Brits save for their funerals while alive, which is smart. But even with planning, it's often not enough to cover costs. Can you believe it? That's roughly 250,000 rubles. Still, it's often not enough, and relatives sell appliances to give their loved one a proper burial.
That's why more and more Brits are opting for cremation or so-called alternative funerals. Rosie Grant got into this business after her mother's death. She bequeathed to her daughter to bury her in the woods, not in a cemetery, and in a coffin woven from bamboo. Rosie thought that many compatriots would like this idea.
I think we should consider sending our loved ones off in a simple natural container, perhaps made of bamboo or wicker, instead of a fancy coffin. It's more affordable and it's also much more eco-friendly because it fully decomposes back into the earth.
Rosie's negotiating with authorities to arrange burials in unusual places, forests, fields, even gardens near the deceased's home. However, many countries, including Russia, prohibit burying the dead anywhere other than a cemetery. This is dictated by sanitary regulations.